Bear me, ladies and gents, we're just going live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's the peasant, it's the prodigious, it's the professor, proclamation news and gatherance. Going back to the module DD 103, investigating the social world 2. It's edited by Deborah H., Drake, Andy Morris, Alan Shipman, and Katie Wheeler. Let's have a quick reflect of what we looked at yesterday. We were talking about hydropolitics. Thinking about hydropolitics, not what we was reading yesterday, but thinking about hydropolitics, what it is today. Brexit, Brexit on a Brexit on a dish. Talking about hydropolitics, talking about Brexit on a dish, taking back our fishermen's rights, taking back our English Channel, taking back our waters, stopping foreign countries fishing our waters, taking back our policies, taking back our agreements. We need our fish. We need our fish for our union, our dominion to maintain Britain. So that's hydropolitics. That's Brexit on a dish. Page 95. Here we go. Good morning, by the way. Where we left off yesterday. This is gonna be the last hour reading. I'm gonna get a little bit ahead over. I want to get past page 100, and then we're gonna go back to modern politics for possibly 3 or 4 days, and then I'll go back to this. I've got to write some notes. I'll do 100 pages in a book, write a few notes, and then I'll move on to the next 100. The book's about, it's only 300 pages long, ain't gonna take forever. Although this paints a rather bleak picture, cross-border problems also bring the potential for cooperation. Let's look at water again as example. Up until now, the states of Central Asia have primarily concentrated a bilateral initiatives to reconcile issues in their relations, while such moves can tackle issues in short term. They are not sustainable because the tensions between the states cannot be considered in isolation, and in effect involve a great number of wider complicated factors as outlined earlier. Upon independence, all five of the Central Asian states signed the Almaty Agreement, which committed them to maintaining Soviet-era allocations of water. This reflected the principles of international agreements such as the Helsinki Rules of 1966 and the UN Convention on the Protection of Use of Transboundary Water Courses and International Lakes of Marcello, 1998. This is followed up by the further multilateral initiatives among Central Asian states such as the Interstate Coordinating Water Commission (ICWC), the Interstate Council on Problems of the Aral Sea Basin (ICAS), and the International Fund for the Aral Sea (IFAS). However, these have essentially reinforced sovereign-era management and central planning over water in the region, and the problems have continued as states have sought to pursue their own national interests. Thus, while attempts have been made to find common solutions, the spectre of conflict remains when considering the role of water in affecting relations between the states and Central Asia. As states that are still relatively new in their exercise of sovereignty, they are keen to preserve their national interests, which are often at odds with those of their neighbours. In each case study, you have been seen how common transboundary resources are a pressing issue due to the water being a basic human right. In the next section, you'll see how competition between states and contestations over sovereignty have led to increasing diplomatic tension between states and East Asia. Looking at the summary, guys, is a picture of the hydropolitics in Central Asia. is a complex between relations, the states, and complicated by, I'll show you the pictures here shortly, artificial borders that were drawn when the region was part of the Soviet Union. Industrial and power infrastructure put in place during the Soviet times, which means that certain areas are independent on others for resources such as water and power. Regional environmental problems such as desertification of the Aral Sea, the fact of the republics of Central Asia are relatively new as sovereign independent states. There's the hydropolitics map of Asia, the Soviet Union, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Korea, and Japan. Looking at case study 2, South and East China Seas. At the start of the chapter, you read about the dispute between UK and Spain on sovereignty over Gibraltar and the surrounding waters. Section 4, it revealed how changes in geopolitics, specifically collapse of the Soviet Union and the emergence of the new states, caused tension and conflict when resources domains cross borders. As figure 3.8 shows, dispute over access and ownership of areas, the sea and island within it, have grown considerably in East Asian area, with China involved in the most disputes. These disputes could potentially have far greater international consequences than disagreement over Gibraltar. They have escalated in recent decades. Page 98. Because of growing economic and political power of Asian countries and the technology ability to exploit resources in the seabed, the Asian region is increasingly powerful in the global economy. But these disputes over common resources have become a growing foreign policy concern for the United States in particular. Since the Second World War, the United States have been a guarantor of security for Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and South Korea. The region accounted for 33% of the world economy in 2007, compared to 21% and 23% for the United States and Western Europe respectively. Denmark 2010 and the increase in political and economic power of some Asian countries ensures they have significant influence when it comes to addressing global issues such as climate change. The South China is bordered by four nation states: Borneo, China and Philippines, and Vietnam, while the East China Sea is bordered by China and Japan. While not of explicit interest here, there is also a third body of water in the area, the Sea of Japan, which connects North and South Korea. Russia and Japan diplomatic relations in this area have long been strained, but particularly so in recent years, for example. The recognition of Japan's disagreement with China over the Senkaku of Diaoyu Islands in 2012, it symbolises Japan's concern about China's growing political and economic might. The CLA 2012. The islands are small and uninhabited about their proximity to shipping lanes, their rich fishing grounds and nearby potential oil, gas and methane reserve. Reserves make them a significant asset in BBC 2014, according to both Japan and China lay a claim to the islands, arguing they have the right to control them. But the United States recognises only Japan's sovereignty in recent years. China has been increasingly aggressive in sending vessels and aircraft into the area. Chinese and Japanese fishing vessels have also collided with one another part of this dispute. The US government has been increasingly concerned with this dispute over the sovereignty, urging both sides to negotiate and abide by international law. The contestation over natural resources is particularly acute, as a as a region is home to only 4% of the world's proven oil reserves, 8% of its natural gas reserves. This means that Asian countries have to import the majority of the energy supplies. Looking at China, for example, already it imports more than half of its oil, and Japan almost all of its oil and gas. As Claire has stated, according to the US Department of Energy, in the next 25 years, Asia's energy consumption will expect it to grow faster than anywhere else in the world. That's why they've got the biggest globalization economic distribution through their produce in the world. This makes the likelihood of tensions over the sovereignty and rights of explored resources and resource-rich areas like Sunaku, Daewoo Island increasingly likely. China, very good at their electronics as well, and clothes. Little clothes are made in China. As you read earlier in this chapter, the UNCLOS allows states to claim a 200-mile extension of sovereignty from the coastline, and all the countries involved in this region have asserted the right. Indeed, China has gone further and requested an extension of sovereignty beyond 200 miles. 200 miles into an extensive area of the East China Sea. China has indicated that it considers to be its right to exploit the oil and gas resources in the area, as has sought to prevent other states from undertaking deep sea exploitation of potential resources. The United States, however, has been increasingly drawn into the disputes at the regional body. The Association of Southeast Asian Oceans, the ASEAN, has also tried to mediate in them, yet it remains to be seen how equitable and lawful the claims of sovereignty and exploitation of common mineral resources will actually be. China argues that many of its claims predate the framing of UNCLOS in 1982, so would not be restrained by the UNCLOS. It has been pointed out that the US Congress has ratified UNCLOS. China claims that there is element of hypocrisy in the United States. The insistence in China obeying concerns that China may start to ignore the treaty altogether and not abide by the permanent core of arbitration decisions, as well as having political ramifications. Claiming sovereignty and exploiting the seabed's mineral resources could have major environmental consequences if not done responsibly. Disputes over sovereignty and the common resources in South and East China Seas are likely to continue. This is page 100, the summary and the conclusion. The politics in Southeast China Seas are increasingly contentious. The change in geopolitics of the area, the economic and the political rise of China, and the comparative decline in the United States. It means that countries such as China claim to have the right to access and exploit areas of common resources. There is increasing demand to finite resource and energy supplies. There is also concerns that UNCLOS and international governance regime will no longer be sufficient and in regulating access, ownership and exploitation of the seas in this region. The conclusion, page 101. This chapter explored how common resources and areas of the world that have been considered to have been common property and responsibility of humankind have come to be managed and arguably mismanaged. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the sea and inland waters are long-standing examples of global common resources, but they can also encompass other resources such as oil and gas. Following technological developments, these resources can be exploited in a world hungry for additional food, minerals, and energy to support growing populations. States are increasingly involved in disputes and conflicts over the right to control and exploit these resources. The concept of sovereignty. Central development of the nation's state system has also started to shift and become contested. Common resources have become strategically important, making them the focus of power struggles between the states. International multicultural organisations such as the United Nations have been played increasingly regarding common resources on a global scale. Yet their power relations of Soviet Union created new states and new borders. The economic and political rise of China and the comparative decline of increasingly acute contestation over common resources has become increasingly acute. The outcome of these power struggles could have significant political and environmental consequences for the international community, as is illustrated by the case studies of Central Asian region and the East and South China Seas. There's a good thing I like there. I'd like to debate it. Uh, what is the concept of the absolute sovereignty of the land? Page 101. That's what that'd be a debate, wouldn't it? I'd like to see people's answers. Page 109. Look at the introduction. What ensures that the self-interested actions of individuals produce harmony rather than conflict? This is a long-standing question among social scientists, and having some found a surprisingly straightforward answer: the price system. The Australian economist Frederick Haywick expressed the belief that prices set by free markets created the opportunities and incentives that drove sustained wealth creation, especially in North America and West Europe. Yeah, let's stop there. So let's talk about the concept of the absolute sovereignty. So you got, say, you try and take um, your, you land or you sea back for your country. How do you define what's your sea from England and to what Spain is? How can you define what you own? Who says that your country owns that sea? Say you got a big load of oil in the bottom of the sea. How comes you own it? Is it by the power or might of men, or what is the reason why they own it? That's what I want to question. Why do they think they own it? It's obviously for the power or might of men and the economy, obviously something along them lines. But why? It's not. Then it's not fair, is it? But you're saying that word there. But you said that word of yeah, produce harmony rather than conflict. You talk about qualities. Equality is supposed to be a big thing, isn't it? It's no qualities. It is conflict. Regardless, yeah, if the other one retaliates because they haven't got the power and might of men to defeat the argument, it's causing conflict, isn't it? Absolutely. So I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, so we're taking back. I'm not saying England taking back the English Channel over Spain. It's not feasible. I don't know the ins and outs, but I'm just saying why. Same as other countries as well. With the United States, there's they've got Australia on the opposite side. Why is such and such their sea and such the other sea? See where I'm coming from? Anyway, by using prices as a guide or as signals, we were led to serve the demands and enlist the powers of capacities of people of whom we know nothing. It was because we relied on a system which had never understood and which we never designed that we had been able to produce the wealth to sustain an enormous increase in the world's population and to begin to realize our new ambitions of disturbing wealth more justly. Page 109. Hayek is a key figure in the Australian school of economic thought and approach that takes the motivations and actions of individuals as basis for understanding society. This is associated with a free market approach, which opposes interference in the setting of prices by agencies such as governments and the large corporations. In this view, and any efforts that regulate or plan the economy, even the undertaken with good intentions such as reducing inequality and or protecting the environment, are viewed as disturbing the harmony of markets, coordinating activity leading to less and more unbalanced wealth for all. Markets put a price on things that are bought and sold within the society. These include people's labour, which they can sell to an employer in return for the income and lets them buy things. The advocates of free markets argue they adjust to match the demand for any item with the supply of it. If demand goes up, prices will rise, encouraging more production. When more supply rises, prices go down. The relationship between supply and demand is a fundamental idea of economics. As economics and populations grow, an increased number of human interactions take place through the markets. These also extend from operating locally to nationally and ultimately across the world. When I read, I don't notice everything, but some things I notice, and it's very, very significant that I noticed it at that apparent time. I think all us readers are the same. We have things in our mind sometimes when we read, not fully concentrating. Page on 10. That's why I'm doing it, recording it, so I can listen to it back, make sure I didn't miss anything. As countries commit to free trade and remove the barriers to it, the advocates of market economies argue that globalization strengthens market abilities to coordinate people's activities in ways which bring mutual gain, without any need to interference. In this view, markets, the prices mechanism, and supply and demand ensure that self-interested behavior of all individuals produces harmony and order rather than chaos and conflict. This school of thought does, of course, assume that rational interest is a key motivation for all people. The chapter will explore the relationship between the common resource problems and the free market. The tragedy of the commons and the problem of putting at the right place the common resources, the concept of public goals and how problems surround them to the problem of common resources is the relative merits of solutions to common resource and the public goods problems. The tragedy of the commons examines the concept of social external and private costs and benefits in free market economics with particularly reference to public goods and common resources. Distinguishing common resources from the public goods, it looks at the differences and similarities between these two goods and explores two ways at dealing with externalities, here taxes and privatisation. A contemporary application on carbon emissions considers the ways carbon emissions, a threat to common resources, have been dealt with in the contemporary world. The drive to establish property rights interrogates and ideas around privatisation of shared resources further and outlines of ideas about managed common resources. I'm not going to read for too much longer. I'll read probably another 10 minutes. Tragedy of the commons. Free market approaches are often criticised after following individuals focused on their own interest with no regard for the wider impact of what they do. This might lead to a production or consumption distinctions that may make sense to the person or organisation that takes them, but are collectively disastrous. When added to all the other decisions simultaneously taken by others, supporters of the free market argue spontaneous order. Order arises because the market prices give all people the information they need to coordinate and harmonise their behaviour. In the view of the free marketeers, even extreme coordination such as a tragedy of the common can be resolved, and are best resolved by letting people organise themselves, without political intervention. The problem of social cost. Hayek never claimed his was a original view. He, he traced it on a long line of earlier economists, notably Adam Smith. Smith famously likened free markets and the price system to an invisible hand, which guided people's activities as producers and consumers without any need for the visible hand of government to cooperate management. For Smith, free markets enable and encourage people to pursue their self-interest. Producers seek the highest profits, and consumers seek the greatest satisfaction for the class of expenditure. Smith, 1979. He believed that free markets would harness efforts and creativity. The results from this make sure everyone gets the best deal by doing what is best for themselves. People end up doing what is also best for society. By the end of the 20th century, free market ideas had gained wide currency. They had been taken up in many of the West Eastern Europe, Asian and Latin American countries in place of attempts at centralized planning for faster development. Governments in Western Europe and the United States have had also reaffirmed their commitment for the free markets. Retreating from models combining planning and substantial welfare state, yet as economies and populations continue to grow, the dominance of free market encountered a challenge from the natural environment and its inherent limitations. The earth has scarce resources whose value might not always be reflected in the price or system. If such resources are wrongly priced or not priced at all, they are they might not be efficiently allocated and substances used in a way free marketeers had always predicted. Hardin's 1968 model of the tragedy of the commons, introduced in chapter 1. It turned directly against Smith's invisible hand. Hardin described how freely acting agents could inadvertently ruin their economy by using in common resources. The tendency to assume the disenfranchised individual will, in fact, be the best decisions for the entire society. It undermined in relation to the commons, who said fate is the rebuttal to the invisible hand. For Hardin, the tragedy occurs because individuals' pursuit of their self-interest has damaging, unsustainable collective consequences. The model of the invisible hand that individuals' actions also provides an external benefit. In other words, a benefit in addition to and beyond those that are just between the buyer and seller, even if it's not international. In this model, companies' pursuit of profit and consumers' pursuit of satisfaction lead to do things that also benefit others in society. For example, companies want to make money for their shareholders, but to do so, they have to provide goods and services that customers want to buy. However, with a common resource that is limited supply, one person increasing consumption does not bring benefits to the others, quite the reverse. Land and natural resources it contains are prime time examples. When one or more sheep is grazed on the farmer gets extra benefits while the others lose out. There is a loss of space and erosion of vegetation and soil. For the rest of the community, these are external costs imposed by the individual on everyone else outside the buyer-seller's relationship. Hardin drew attention to the problems that arise where individuals could have to pay full costs of their actions. It is impossible for the activity to be on one person's interest, but against the collective interest, he suggests, leaving people free to pursue private profit would result in the bad social outcomes like the grazing of the commons, not and the excessive pollution of land, sea, and air. The car provides a way of illustrating this debate. As was introduced in chapter 1, individuals may prefer to travel by car and think it's faster, cheaper, and more enjoyable than travelling by train. It is a sense that it is cheaper private cost and amount that anyone person pays to drive are direct and clear, yet these are only some of the costs of that activity driving involves. The full or social costs would include the direct costs of the community when people drive. Cars create noise, air pollution, congestion, and damage to the road. Represent external costs which the whole society suffers from or has to pay to remedy. Those external costs fall on the whole of society. The individual doesn't pay for them alone. This means that an action that is beneficial for the individual is damaging for society as a whole. In other words, social costs, which are much higher than individuals' private costs, exceed social benefits, which are just individuals' private benefits in making particular journey by car. As the individual gets benefits, they value of £15 and pays the cost of £12. But the external cost imposed by the journey work of around £4. Why might society not restrict individuals' car use? I'll stop there, guys. I mean, I am nearly falling asleep. Page 114. Thank you all so much. Take care. Speak soon.